Well, hello, everyone. This is the material that I have talked about for a while that I wish our textbook had covered, but does not, and that is the material on children and mental health. So I feel it very important that we need to cover this. Hopefully, it will play to our advantage and work well for us now. So here we go. As far as some basic information about children and mental health, know this. According to statistics, approximately 20% of children suffer from some form of mental illness or behavioral problems or emotional problems or even developmental problems. And if you think about that, that comes to a total of 1 in 5. All right. And for some people, that can be a very disheartening number when you think about it. Mental illness, behavioral problems, emotional problems, and though it's not listed there, I'd even say developmental problems. But the truth about the statistics is this. While these numbers may seem a bit high, okay, I don't want you to panic over the numbers because a lot of children have more than one disorder. And the way that this works is they count up the number of disorders, okay, against the number of kids. And that's how they make their determination if they're, as far as the statistics of 20%. There really is something known as comorbidity, which is a much better statistic, a much better way of gauging this, because unfortunately, the 1 in 5 is not that high. There are kids, unfortunately, that suffer from more than one thing at a time. In other words, they may suffer from anxiety disorders as well as depression. They may suffer from ADHD as well as conduct defiance disorders or oppositional defiance disorders. So you do see that a lot where children are suffering from more than one thing. Not always, but it happens enough that it really starts to throw the numbers off. No one's quite sure exactly what the statistics are, if it's truly 1 in 5, but basically that's what they come up with, this is 20%. Nevertheless, in terms of prevalence rates, it's really not an exact science. Okay, it's really not an exact science in this regard. So many children, actually, it may be even higher because so many children go undiagnosed. Okay, they don't go treated. And a lot of times we count the people that we count based on treatment. So in some regards, you would say the number is lower because of comorbidity. And in other veins, you'd say that the number of children suffering from disorders is higher because we're not even counting the ones we don't know about. We're only counting the ones we do know about. Okay. Why would a child not get help? Okay. Why would a parent not take the steps to help out their child and stuff like that? There really are a number of reasons why a lot of times parents do not get the help for their children that their children need. A lot of times they don't see it as a problem, okay, that requires professional intervention. They don't see it as something that requires a counselor or a psychiatrist or a trained professional to intervene. So because of that, they think, it's something that you don't need to worry about it. Maybe they will outgrow it. It's just a phase. So they go without getting help. And we see that a lot, okay? Long after the fact, you ask, why didn't you come in earlier? Well, we thought they'd outgrow it. And so, how many times do parents never take their kids in? Because of that very reason. It's hard to say. Still, another reason is they don't see the problem at all. All right? They don't see it at all. A lot of times it can be due to communication, poor lines of communication with their children. If you remember the material I covered on, it's 8 o'clock. Do you know where your kids are? And the negligent parents say, I don't know and I don't care. A lot of times, if the kid is quiet, we don't worry. If they're out and about, we assume all is good. Poor lines of communication can be part of it. Okay. So what we have here is that they know that there's a problem, but they don't think it will require professional intervention. They think it's just a phase and the child will outgrow it. They don't see the problem at all, or sometimes they do see the problem and families will intentionally hide it, especially if bringing it to professional help would point out the fact that abuse is occurring in the homes. So unfortunately, that is one of the reasons that sometimes, kids do not get help. They're suffering from depression, they're suffering from anxiety. If we got them treated, it might come out that there is physical abuse, sexual abuse in the home. We don't want that to come out. The child goes undiagnosed and untreated. Of the different types of disorders, we're going to go through some of these abnormalities here. And I want to start with talking about what are called behavioral and emotional difficulties. And one of the ones that we see a lot of or hear discussed a lot is ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Okay. First of all, to define it, be aware that what we refer to as ADHD is highly elevated levels of anxiousness, full of energy, inability to focus, inability to stay to task, children who turn around and can't, stay in their chair at school, or there are issues with them being excessively active in that regard. And it's to the point that it's detrimental to their health. Okay. It's detrimental to their ability to stay to task. It's detrimental to their ability to just sort of even lead a normal life. That's what we're talking about. We're not going to get into the discussion of if this is best treated by, medications at this point. I'm not going to talk about it at this point. If it's just a child, some parents believe it needs better parenting. I'm not going to get into that. I just want to talk about the difficulties and go from there. Most of these are usually diagnosed ADHD around age 7 or later. Those symptoms can actually start to occur around as early as ages 3 or 4. And a lot of times we just see them as a very hyper child and we don't think much about it. But when they start to get to kindergarten and first grade and second grade and it's interfering with their ability to function, then we sometimes believe it necessary to step in that regard. Okay. ADHD is really something of a two-phase system. And as I just said, and this is a little bit in there, and I threw in this picture just to hopefully make you smile. Phase 1 of this two-phase system, basically you see the signs of hyperactivity starting around age 3. And once again, we a lot of times are quick to say, hey, that you've got a little one, they're just full of energy, that they bounce off the walls. Isn't it cute? Okay. But then in phase 2, we start to see inattentiveness problems, okay, and staying on task problems, and inability to focus problems. And a lot of times these start showing themselves around the schooling years, ages 5, 6, and 7. And because of that, then we turn around and realize this may be more than just a child who's full of energy. We might want to do something. I would dare you to ask yourself if you know of any child who turns around and fits this mold of being someone who suffers from ADHD. Okay. It is worth noting that a lot of these children who go through hyperactivity issues, it will decrease. Hyperactivity tends to decrease as children age. Okay. That is very true. But the inability to focus, not necessarily so. Okay. So you may see kids that get a little bit older and they're 10, they're 12, they're 14, they're teenagers now. They don't have the hyperactivity, but the loss of focus still exists, which sort of brings us to our different types of ADHD, because there really is 3 different types worth noting here. Okay. First of all is what we call ADHD primary focus inattentiveness, okay? And that we see a lot more in kids who are in their tweens and adolescents. We also see ADHD where the primary focus is hyperactivity, okay? So it's not a question of inattentiveness. We see this much more in the early ages, 3, 4, 5. They are just full of energy all the time, and that's what we will diagnose them with. And then you've got those kids that really have it combined. Okay, that really have it combined. They're excuse me, primarily hyperactive, and they are primarily inattentive both. Okay. It is estimated, before I get into the causes, that about 4 to 6% of kids can be clinically diagnosed as hyperactive. Okay. And boys are much more likely to suffer from ADHD than girls. We don't completely understand that, but our research and our statistics has proven that to be true for quite some time. That doesn't mean that little girls cannot be hyperactive and drawing on inattentiveness, but we see it much more in boys. Okay. As far as causes, some say biological. Okay. While others will say it is genetic. Okay. And others do find that there is some environmental causes. Others do show correlations between ADHD in children and problems in the home. So you cannot really erase one and blame it all on the other. You cannot say take environment out, it's all biological. You can't say it's, forget all that, it always runs in the family and it's here again. Not automatically. And you surely can't say it's environmental only. Okay. So really there are times that all three of these can come into play. They truly can. As far as treatment for these, there are actually things, believe it or not, you use, which are stimulants. Okay. They use stimulants because the body's reaction to a lot of these stimulants is to try and calm the body down. So things such as Ritalin, Dexedrine, Cylert, Cylert. These are all examples of stimulants. Okay, they activate areas in the brain, and sometimes that help with self-regulation. They activate parts of the brain that control inhibition. And that's the idea behind these stimulants. You're trying to turn on those parts of the brain that will calm things down by, making the inhibition centers more effective. There are depressants such as Adderall that will be used, but a lot of times it's more a use of things such as stimulants. Okay. All right. We also talk about what are called conduct problems. Conduct problems are really, as you see, they're the general category of rule-breaking behavior. Okay. In mild cases, we're talking about things such as yelling and temper tantrums and whining and things like that as far as conduct. And we say these are mild. Okay. They happen. Children do these. We don't even call them a disorder at this point. It's a problem, not an abnormality, not a disorder. Okay, such as ADHD, which is a disorder. The more moderate to severe cases, however, can include some intense aggression, can include some destructiveness, things of this sort. And that obviously is detrimental to everyone around them in that regard. Okay, so those kind of things we need to definitely address. Now, there are two types of conduct problems worth mentioning here. One type is what is called ODD, oppositional defiance disorder. And here you're talking about kids a lot of time who are, just as the term applies, they are openly defiant. Okay, anyone in a position of authority, they are openly hostile against, and so on. This doesn't happen based off a single day's behavior. This kind of behavior has to be present for usually at least 6 months, because a lot of therapists, a lot of psychiatrists, a lot of counselors, if you bring your child in because they had a bad day yesterday, and, I think my child has some conduct issues. Okay, how long has this been going on? The last week. It's probably not enough for them to start into full-blown therapy. It's not enough for them to start into full-blown medications and things like that. If the severity is bad enough, I've been told they don't automatically wait 6 months if the behavior is really dangerous to others. But usually they want to see that it is a trend and not something that has just happened in the last day or the last week or the last 2 weeks. They want to turn around and address it in that regard. Some of the characteristics worth noting for ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, include rule breaking, refusing the requests of people in authority, arguing, blaming others, being spiteful, being resentful, losing their temper, things like that. That's what we're talking about with an oppositional defiance. They are openly defiant to people in positions of authority, mom, dad, teachers, things of that sort, and they really do show it in that regard. The other is what we call conduct disorders. And with conduct disorders, what we're talking about here is children who break rules and openly hurt other people. They may do it physically, they may do it psychologically, they may do it emotionally, okay? And some of these people do grow up to be adults, and stuff like that, where you meet adults who are very much the type to physically or emotionally or psychologically try to hurt somebody else. A lot of times this is started in childhood, and it just continues on. As far as characteristics to this kind of stuff, what we see in a lot of conduct disorder children is a lot of fighting, a lot of bullying of others. They will hurt other people. They will turn around and even hurt animals. Just basic cruelty, okay? And right along with that, we see sometimes a lot of theft, a lot of stealing, a lot of lying, destroying property. This is what we refer to as conduct disorders, okay? And if you need to rewind to catch all that list, that wouldn't be a bad thing, okay? Believe it or not, the causes for this are not completely clear. A lot of times we get into the nature-nurture controversy. Is it more biological? Is it more environmental? We do see sometimes where parents are good parents, they've done well, but a child has taken this path and become ODD, oppositionally defiant. You hear stories of loving parents, where the children turn out this way. But the truth of the matter is that the vast majority of these causes are due to parenting styles. They really, truly are due to parenting styles. So if you've got a parent who is very authoritarian, or a parent who is very negligent or permissive to the point that they're allowing their child to do whatever, so they break rules and they hurt people, a lot more of this conduct problems is due to the environment than it probably is due to biology. And that means it can be treated. That means it really can be treated. As far as treatment goes, we're talking family therapy, we're talking parental training. This can be effective, and it works well if children are still young. It works well if children are still young. When kids get to be the tweens, they've been doing this for several years. When they get to be teenagers, and they've done it for many years, it's harder. It's a lot harder to overcome it at that point. It's not impossible, but there's a lot more to it at that regard. And so that can be part of it. Okay, folks, that's enough for now. I don't want to throw all of it together into one big mass. I will cover some of the other disorders in a second video. Take care.